Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, this is San Bernardino Zoo, and this is our latest animal, the beautiful Asian water monitor. We're going to be building an amazing habitat for the water monitor today, and I've been planning this one for so long. We didn't even have the water monitor in the game when I started it. This dates right back to Tekton Zoo, and we're going to be building it here on the islands. Up in the aerial view, we can see that this habitat is opposite the cassowaries and just next to the small-clawed otters. Let's get building. The main feature of this habitat is going to be an extended underwater viewing gallery that extends all the way along this path here. I had this concept way back when I first started Tekton Zoo about 2 years ago now. It was one of the first habitat designs I came up with for the Nile monitor. I was so excited to build it until I realized the pretty obvious point that I should have realized earlier, that keeping Nile monitors outside in England would result in some very unhappy and fairly soon dead Nile monitors, and the habitat idea wouldn't work. So I had to abandon it. But I had the sketch kicking about ever since then, just waiting to be used when I had a warmer zoo to put it in, and today is the day. But rather than the Nile monitor, we're going to use the Asian water monitor because the modelling and the textures on these guys is amazing, and they spend even more time in the water and they can deep dive. The cinematics at the end of this episode are one of my favourites I've ever done, I think. They are so cool, these animals, so stick around for those. So we've got these glass barriers going the whole length of the path, and there's a few tricks I've used here to get them to look right. So firstly, the glass, we need it higher on the guest side of things to stop the monitors from climbing out, and then lower on the habitat side so that they can get from the land into the water. So you put it in with the barriers high on both sides. That enables you to put the water in where you want it, and then you can go in and lower the barriers just at the back where you want them to be lower. And now we're going to use some of the grass panels to join up the rockwork that we've put in and the terrain behind it. Obviously, we're going to be raising the terrain, so we can't get the terrain to actually join onto the water in Planet Zoo, so we need something to bridge that gap, and these grass panels do that really nicely. And I'm also using the mud walls with the strangler fig roots mixed in that we created for the giant otter habitat, because they make a really nice backdrop for this underwater viewing area. So we'll copy these all the way along until we get to the end, and these will join really nicely into those rocks. And you can see the big gap behind them where the terrain's a lot lower. So we'll be raising the terrain, and we'll get a really nice seamless look to it. Now I know it's early, but it's time for Franchise Masters. So if you're going to be building a water body like this where you're using glass to keep the water in rather than the terrain so you can get more freedom, if you select the parts of the glass that are keeping the water in on the inside and then go to Settings, Habitat Perimeter, if you turn that off, the game won't consider this to be part of the habitat, and then you can just go ahead and carry on building however you like. These won't affect it, all they're doing is holding the glass in. Right, onto the terrain. So we're going to use the stamp tool to bring the terrain up to the level of the grass panels that we put in. Don't need to be too accurate here, I just want it to be the right height, and then get a nice bit of terrain to work with. So we'll copy this around, cover the whole area of the habitat. We'll put a temporary path in so that we can get staff in and out. This is going to be just a little staff path that will join onto the main path for the guests. I'm not worried too much about how this looks at the moment. Just want to get the habitat working. Going to be doing quite a lot of testing with the monitors to make sure that they've got enough room to swim and enough room to dive. Results of the first test are in. Haven't even put one in the habitat yet, but there's not enough water area for them. So I'm going to make this a little bit wider and then move all the rocks back into place. And we can see now that we've got enough space for them, and then we're going to start making it look nice. So we've already got that cool dragon statue that we made for the entrance to the area, which we've reused in a few habitats, but I want some new ones for this habitat, so we're going to make something similar using the same pieces from the tropical pack, but just make something a bit more water monitory and a bit less dragony. We'll have one of these at either end of the glass viewing area, and then we'll make a really simple Balinese style column to cover up the rest of the posts that join up the glass panels. But this time we're going to use some different pieces as well. So we've got the stone or concrete, I think it is, dwarf caiman statues from the aquatic pack, and they've got a really nice texture on them with the spikes on their tail. So I want to see if we can incorporate this into the statue. So we'll copy it, spin it upside down, get the color right so it suits the statue better, and then we get this kind of frilled effect on the neck of the lizard, which I really like. It's a shame we don't have the sort of monitor lizard body. We've got a monitor lizard head, but then we've only got human and snake bodies to use. So mixing up the snake bodies, the sort of snake slash fish tail, and then I put some human parts on just to serve as a base, and then we'll copy it to the end, and then we'll start building a wall. So if you remember this wall that we built for the otters, which I really like, this kind of Balinese orange and grey wall, I'm going to reuse this and then edit it heavily because I want a really dark kind of foreboding look to this habitat. So we're going to have one wall here as an extra viewing window. There'll be a little path down this side as well, and then we'll fill in the glass part and use that as the wall for the entire rest of the habitat. So once I've got the height correct, we'll fill it in and also get the colors correct. So we want a really dark grey and quite sort of faded look on this. That will go in nicely with the sort of vibe of the rest of the habitat that we're going to start building in a minute. And then we'll make a new version of the wall that doesn't have a viewing window in it and use this to build the walls around the rest of the habitat. So we'll just start copying this one piece of wall around. It doesn't need to exactly meet the barriers. All those glass barriers you can see there will be replaced with null barriers in a second. And then we're going to bring across the tower from the Bali Gate entrance of this area and use this to create a temple that is the home of the water monitor. It effectively serves as their shelter. So we're going to have 4 of these towers positioned around a shelter building. Just get a really imposing temple-y kind of look, which I really love. This was one of my favourite habitats in the zoo before I'd even finished building it. I really like the way it looks. So we're going to copy these walls all the way around until we get the shape of the shelter right. You can see that big old lump of terrain there. We're going to need to put a retaining wall in to hold that up, or look like it's holding it up at least later on. And the path that you can just about see on the left here, that is a guest path. So the guests are going to be able to walk all the way around this habitat. They wouldn't really be paying too much attention to it on this side of it because it's just the back of it. But it means that we need to get the back looking as good as the front because it can be seen. As I've mentioned before, that's sort of my rule when I build my zoos. If you can see it from the guest path, then that needs to be top priority, 100% looking amazing. If you can see it from an aerial view, then pretty much same again, it's got to look really good. If you can't see it from an aerial view or from a guest path, then I don't really care. We don't need to put too much work into it as long as it looks okay. Now this is starting to look really good already. I'm very happy with how this is coming along. So let's do some landscaping. So first of all, I'm just going to put a load of rock at the bottom of the water part of the habitat. This is going to be covered up later with something more interesting, but parts of it will poke through. So I want that to look good. And then we're going to put some dirt and sand to erase the bits of grass that are remaining at the edge of the viewing gallery here. And then we'll start putting some plants in. So we're going to use, again, just a modified version of the bits of jungle that we've been placing all around this part of the zoo. The Scavola bushes, I absolutely love these bushes. They're perfect for covering up parts of habitats and just making them look more interesting. Now we've got some slightly jagged bits of terrain there where the actual terrain joins the grass panels, so we'll get all of that covered up with plants as well, so none of those can be seen. Maybe copy a few of these rocks over as well to use those to cover up bits and just start to get a really natural looking kind of almost a riverbank effect. And we'll bring in some of the tropical leaf litter as well, which is such a great piece. One of my favourite pieces from the latest pack, and that, again, that'll just cover up some of those jagged gaps. And when we're finished, there'll be nothing that you can see at all there. It'll be a completely seamless transition from terrain to grass panel, and then rock, and then water. So speaking of rocks, we'll put a rock in there as well, and then do some terrain painting, get little bits of grass in as well. The dring grass seemed to work best here. And as always, we concentrate mainly on plants from the correct biome and continent for the animals, but we can also mix in ones that are just from the correct biome and not the right continent. It'll only knock about 1 or 2% off the animal's happiness, and that's more important for me anyway, to make the habitat look good than to have the animals all on 100% happiness. I'm happy with like 98%, not a problem. I don't know if you guys get this, but if there's like one blade of grass sticking out of a rock rather than the ground, then I can't be doing with it. I have to move it and get it precisely positioned. Maybe that's just me. Let's move on to the shelter. So we'll copy the towers across and then get some more of this wall in there and get this into the right place, like so. And then we'll get this even darker so it fits in better with the towers. Get really almost a black on the walls there. Copy this across. It's definitely high enough to keep the monitors in, but we need a roof on it as well so it actually functions as a shelter. Now most of the roofs that come with the tropical pack are huge, so what I'm going to do is just use the eaves, the eave pieces, to create the sides of the roof that you can actually see from the guest path. So copy these across here, and we'll do that all the way around. And then for the top of the roof, I'm actually going to make a flat roof using the Arctic roof piece, because the wood on that piece actually matches in color the eaves of the tropical pack pieces really nicely, and it fits in really well, especially when you see it from an aerial view. They go together and make a really seamless roof. So we'll copy these across and then start working on the shape. You can see it's a really irregular shape, this roof, the way the wall at the back curves around. So we're not going to be able to build this as we would do normally. So what we're going to do is take the each individual piece of the Arctic roof, disconnect it from its group, and then join it onto the groups of the individual wall pieces. That'll spin it automatically into the right angle for us. And then if we do that all the way around and then make some final adjustments, get them to join up exactly with the eaves, put some end pieces on as well and cover up any issues with a few of the basket ferns, then if we take a look at it now, we've got a really seamless looking roof there, even though it's all grid pieces. Pretty happy with that. Now we need to get the monitors to be able to go in and out of the shelter, always useful. So we will delete some of this wall and put an arch piece in. And then we'll colour the arch piece so that it matches the rest of the wall and use some of the panel pieces to fill in the gaps, like so. We'll try and get that slightly offset from the arch, get a more of an interesting look to it. So it's just slightly behind it. Copy that across to the other side, and then we need to move these decorations as well. So I'm going to delete half of them and then just have one on each side, nicely centered, so that it forms a nice sort of display. So we'll get that in exactly the right place, copy it across, get rid of the last one, and that's the archway done. Then we'll put a concrete floor inside it, so just make it look more realistic, easy to clean obviously, get that the right colour, sort the terrain out so it's perfectly flat. We'll make a little custom fern on the outside here just to cover up this last little bit of grass panel that you can see. So just copy two of the basket ferns and spin them around a bit. And then we'll move on to that retaining wall that I mentioned. So this is one of my favourite blueprint pieces. This is by Toves, who's an amazing builder, a really good YouTuber as well. Check his channel out if you haven't seen it already, Toves Plays. He's made this amazing gabion wall. We do have these as one of the barriers in the game, but they are not great. Being diplomatic about it, they are probably my least favourite of all the in-game barriers. I have literally never used them, put them down once, thought nope, and never again. But luckily Toves made this amazing blueprint, so we can just copy this all the way around the parts of the terrain that are raised to make it look realistic. I'm also going to use it to join this path in as well. So we're going to cover up these path borders and do a load of changes to the terrain and planting. And eventually we'll have this path so it's actually sat into the surrounding terrain and looking really natural rather than this sort of weird floating thing that we've got at the moment. I'm going to change it as well to the new tropical pack path, that sort of concrete / grass combo. It works really nicely. And when we're finished, the back of this habitat is going to look just as good as the front, albeit less sort of architecturally interesting. If you're wondering how this is all working, that is all the power and water that we need for this habitat and most of the others. That's just next to the treetop trail. We also need to make sure that the monitors can't escape. They're really good at climbing, and these walls are fairly climbable. So we're going to put some overhanging anti-climb mesh barriers in here. I built these a while ago. I think they were an original idea for the otters, but I decided to go in a different direction. But I had one of them hanging about. Always a good idea to keep anything you build if it's good, even if you don't need it. You might need it later, and I managed to use those again here. And then we're going to mesh over the gaps in the tower as well, so if the monitors manage to get into those, they're not going to just escape. I really like this effect. It's quite of a sort of almost an austere kind of look of this black rock with the mesh behind it. We're going to put some custom hot wire in as well, just to make sure that they don't climb up the outside of the shelter, get onto the roof and escape that way. So we'll just place one line of that across here. This is the only part that can get to it. And then the last thing that we're going to do before we are finished is bring across the root arrangement that we made for the giant otter habitat and put this on the base of the underwater area. I love how this looks. You'll see it in the cinematics in a second. It's just the finishing touch and I really like it. Let's check out the finished habitat. There's the hot wire and the walls of the shelter, but maybe we should zoom out a bit. There we go. I really like this habitat, especially in that light. This is the guest view from the start of the path, where when the monitor's swimming on the surface, they're at eye level. And then at the bottom of the path, where the path goes down and the water deepens, when they swim underwater, they're at eye level, which I really like. It's feeding time, so let's take a look at him with his underwater fish feeder. They look so cool underwater. I had a lot of fun filming this little sequence. Took a lot of fiddling about to get it all to work properly, but I am so pleased with the finished result. It's actually really lucky that I couldn't build this in Tekton Zoo, because it's so much better with the water monitors than it would have been with the Nile monitors. This is where we started today, and this is where we are now. There is just one habitat to go in the islands, which we will do next week, and it is all complete. Thank you so much for watching as always. I will see you then.